Welcome to the Anacortes City Council meeting of March 4th, 2024. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And Mr. Franczak, you take the roll, please.
Mr. Fantini.
Here.
Mr. Young.
Here.
Mr. Walters.
Here.
Ms. Cleland McGrath.
Here.
Ms. Moulton.
Here.
Mr. McDougall.
Here.
Ms. Hubick.
Here.
Thank you.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, announcements and committee reports. I have 4 quick announcements. This is a good day to think about it. 4th of July parade applications are open, so please sign up your group. Go on the city website and sign up. Our Avenue, so speaking of thinking about warmer weather, we did not have the best weather this morning, so I did put out a 6 March date of weather dependent to open our Avenue. That is this week. We're probably not going to make that one, but we're going to get pretty close. And the team is working as fast as possible, given the weather conditions, to get the last bit of asphalt down and stripe it. So that's really all that's left. The city and the port released a press release this afternoon. And again, this is about information to exploring the concepts and funding for a new event center. And again, to highlight that, the first phase of this project, with approval, we will take to council for approval, and the port will take to their commission an interlocal that splits the cost of the initial phase of this study. The city and port will hold a public joint meeting on March 25th, 2024 to discuss this interlocal agreement, and this meeting will be at 5 p.m. in council chambers. And then the last one is just a reminder, daylight savings time is this weekend, if you can believe it, the 10th, so Sunday. So spring forward. All right, next announcement, committee report, Public Works Committee.
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. The Public Works Committee met today at 5. It was Councilmember Walters, Young, and myself, and a whole slew of Public Works staff. So that was great to have so many people there and learn so many things. We had a traffic safety committee meeting as part of our Public Works Committee meeting. We're doing that quarterly. We absorb traffic safety into Public Works. So we've had some different requests from constituents. One was about improving safety at the intersection of D Avenue and 23rd Street, because that's a really good way for people to go up into the forest lands, come down to the pool, into schools, and it's kind of a scary spot. So staff will talk to our traffic engineer that we have on call about that. We also talked about West 10th and Minnesota, some parking questions there, and Kansas, and parking on Coho. So a lot of the times the requests are to do with speeding, if you can imagine, and what we can do to calm that, and how well stop signs work, which is pretty darn well. And things like actual physical barriers to slow people down because they have to, like a mini roundabout or something of that nature, or bulb out. So we have all kinds of conversations about those options. But again, most of these will go to the traffic engineer for further review and study about what would be safest in these areas, what would work best. We talked about the water treatment plant emergency, which is on tonight's agenda, so more to follow on that. The bid for our big outfall project has come in with 3 bids that are being evaluated by staff and by our consultant HDR to determine which one of those. Hopefully there will be a really good one we can go forward with. The most exciting thing we talked about tonight was the potential of a pavement grant for South Commercial Avenue to repave it from 13th Street all the way up to 34th Street. This would be a Transportation Improvement Board grant, which is a state grant. And the reason there's money is because other jurisdictions have not spent money they've been awarded for grants. So there's this pot of money out there, and we are going to apply for $1.9 million. And that will also cover, in addition to the paving, redoing 80 ADA ramps and also putting in bike lanes. And WashDOT would pay part of our 20% match. So if all goes well, we'll know at the beginning of May, and we could get that project going. And it would have to be completed by the end of the year. So, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a big deal, and I appreciate the work the staff has put into working with WashDOT, and hopefully we'll make that happen, because we've been
Memo.
hearing from you. Mr. Young.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add, it wasn't on the agenda, but just sort of that the Economic Development Committee met last week, and it was, we're still reorganizing. We have new committee members. Mr. McDougall was there, as well as we had a chance to meet with the Center for Economic Development at Western Washington University, which was wonderful. And we had, of course, Ms. Snyder and Mr. Coleman there. This was their chance to sort of delve into the opportunities that are presented with them. One of the things that we found quite interesting was that as we worked through what our request is, our statement of what we're looking to find out and what we're looking to sort of see where we are in our city, what we have, what we don't have, what we want, what we need. And, but, you know, there's also the component that allows a peer review, which we thought was quite interesting. Not only do you have external, but internal resources that allows those sort of checks and balances of due diligence when we began to put forward ideas and thoughts. It allows those minds to be able to come to the table with us as a city as we begin to make some decisions about where and what we want to do. But, you know, so it's sort of evolving as we go right about now. We have another meeting scheduled for next week, but we will keep you abreast. The good news is that this is work that's been done by for the State Attorney General's office, the Governor's office, and so many others. So the quality of work is superb, and the depth that it gives us to do investigations about what we think we may want or what the city may need and opportunities we may have is a broad brush, but it allows us to reach those people and organizations and to see whatever it is that we want to do. But the good news is we're making progress, and I just want to bring that forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, and sorry we missed that one on there. And any other announcements or committee reports I missed?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
I almost forgot. So Mayor Miller and I were at a county meeting of the North Star Advisory Group last week in Burlington, and we had some breakout groups. One was on housing, one was on behavioral health, for example, and I'm a new appointee to that committee, and it's mayors and council people and staff from the municipalities around the county, and some really good conversations were had. And I'm very glad to be a part of that and bring what I'm learning back to the HACS committee and the city in general. I also attended a homeless service providers meeting hosted by the Volunteers of America, the new organization running the county's coordinated entry program. So it was great to see that level of coordination and the questions from different providers around the county, and communicating with VOA staff about how to make that as seamless as possible to help our residents in need. And that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements or committee reports?
Mayor
Ms.
Miller,
Moulton.
sorry, I do have one more. I knew I went to another meeting over at the county. I'm a member of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee for Skagit County, and the county's rates went up significantly, 30% as of October 1st, 2023. And so the conversations have been about how and when do we bring these increases to our communities. And after much deliberation, the committee decided to do the main price increase September 1st of this year. So we'll bring more information on that from future Public Works Committee meetings, but our garbage bill will go up because the county's garbage bill went up. It went up quite a bit. So that'll be September 1st, but there will be no further increases in those costs until January 1st of 2026, and that'll be a simple CPI increase like happens every year. So September 1st is when the increase will happen. Okay, I'm really done now. Thanks.
Did you want to put a percentage on that one?
It's hard to say. So the county's rates went up 30%, but our rates aren't strictly what the county does. So our rates have other things, you know, we have our trucks to maintain, we have our staff. So it won't be a 30% jump for us from the rate we have now, because that's not all what we pay to the county. So I'm not sure of the breakdown, but it still will be significant. I'm sure it will be a double-digit increase.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot for that one, but yeah, there are some complexities to how we translate the county tipping fees to our fees that we're going to have to pass along to the public. Any other announcements, committee reports? Okay, on to item number 4, which is public comment, and this is an opportunity for any member of the public that wishes to address the council on anything that is not on our agenda. If it's on our agenda, it's got an asterisk next to it, and we'll call on you for that point. But I do have one member signed up that's wanted to speak on a topic that's not on our agenda. So you sign up, you get to go first. And I've got Linnea McCord. And as always, please state your name, because I may have butchered it, and we can get it correctly for the record, and what city you live in. Thank you. And then make sure the light's on, and yep, hit the button on below the base of the microphone.
One?
Yep, there
Now
we go.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I've been coming to
So
these meetings.
name and city.
I live in Anacortes. And I've been coming to these meetings since the beginning of January, and I'm a little bit confused. And I'm going to talk tonight about the Habitat for Humanity lease. Now, if I'm confused, I think there may be some other people in the community that might be confused. You see, I practiced law since 1976. I started teaching law in 1978. And I don't understand what the Habitat for Humanity lease is doing. So I thought we'd start with the Washington Open Public Meetings Act. It was passed in 1971 to make sure that government affairs were open, accessible, and responsive, and simple and clear so the public could participate in everything that you're doing. So here's the quote. It says, "The legislature finds and declares that all public commissions, boards, councils, committees, subcommittees, departments, divisions, offices, et cetera, exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of this chapter that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of this state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed and informing the people's public servants of their views so that they may retain control over the instruments created." So we need to make sure that the public is included. Efficiency is not the goal, and saying that the public doesn't have a say is wrong. Included in this is also 3 duties, fiduciary duties of loyalty, account, and care, which means you have to explain to us in reasonable terms what you're doing. So let's take a look at the Habitat for Humanity lease. Number 1, we don't know what the deal is yet. This is not a lease, it's a gift. 100 years, we're not a tribe. 100 years renewable for 100 years for $200 doesn't sound right. What was the value of the land? Maybe $300,000, $350,000. Have you considered what our taxes have done in the last 5 years? How has it impacted the people? Have they had time to respond? From what I saw, the answer and what you saw is no. They haven't had a chance to respond. They don't know what's going on. We need to make sure that they do know. Some say that they bought their properties expecting that to be a park. Others are concerned about the crowding. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I taught in 2 business schools for 28 years, and I have a law degree and a business degree, so I can tell you that 2024 is not going to be like any other year you've seen before. I just want to let you know that we're in serious financial trouble, And what I want to say is let's work together to make sure that we make the decisions for all of us in Anacortes. This is your home as well as ours. And 2024 is not a year that will be kind to those who are reckless with finances. Thank you.
Thank you. And we don't do applause here, but anything done with any kind of lease will be happening in the public. Anybody else? I don't have anybody else signed up, but okay. So you missed the sign-up sheet, but that's okay. Come on up. We'll give you 3 minutes to address the council. And so, name and city, please.
My name is Colleen List. My city is Anacortes, which
Okay.
I love.
Maybe a little closer to the. You can move the microphone up. There you go. Yep.
Colleen List, Anacortes.
Gotcha. All
A
right.
city that I love, I live in and adore. Good evening, Mayor Miller, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to start the conversation between the city and residents regarding the city's plan to have 5 rental housing units built on a small lot in a single-family home neighborhood community. Our concern is the overcrowded nature of this plan, as somewhat obscurely included in the City Council's February 20th, 2024, 197-page council packet. It is our understanding that the city is making the 5-unit requirement of the developer for the parcel that is designated for 2 single-family homes. We are shocked that this plan has progressed so far without the knowledge of the neighborhood residents. Shocked. There has been no public notice on the lot itself or any other communications to the residents of this neighborhood that I am aware of. We have many questions that we would like addressed, and a 3-minute statement is not the right venue, Mr. Miller. So, Mr. Mayor Miller, we are asking, 1, that you put this subsidized rental build project on the city council agenda. 2, we request that the neighbors be notified in writing about the build plan and notified when the council meeting will be held with appropriate time. We request signage be immediately posted on the site regarding the plans of this parcel. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yep. I saw the hand earlier. Come on up.
Hi, my name is Xuan Mu, and I live in Anacortes. Dear Anacortes City Council members and Mayor Miller, you should have received a copy of the comments I'm going to make at this time. We are residents of Anacortes since 2018, and we love the city for its small town feel and the options to enjoy the outdoors in a suburban environment. A few days ago, we learned from our neighbors in the area that the city of Anacortes is planning to build a 5-family residential structure with 7 alley parking spaces, no garage, on a single-family lot on the West 5th Street between Kansas and Minnesota Avenue. This does not integrate cleanly into the existing residential neighborhood and poses issues with multiple residents living on a small building lot. Because this area is a well-developed, mature single-family community, a multi-family dwelling will no doubt greatly increase vehicle traffic and affect neighborhood safety for pedestrians and the children on bikes. We would appreciate the City Council and the Mayor Miller responding to the following questions. Number 1, has the West 5th Street multifamily build project been approved? If yes, we would want to know what communications and the pertinent documents process were used for the approval process. Question number 2. How can a multifamily project be approved on a single-family lot in the city of Anacortes? Number 3, we would also want to know how the project will be funded and the process for selecting the dollar amount of funding a multifamily project. We have not received communications or notices about a public hearing on the West 5th Street project. Wouldn't the current local residents be informed of a change in zoning for a multifamily dwelling versus a single-family dwelling in their neighborhood? While we appreciate the support of the City Council and the City of Anacortes for multifamily affordable housing, we also expect to receive open, two-way, transparent communication from the city. And we are all working together to make our city livable and safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to address the council? Anything that's not on our agenda? Take a look at online. Didn't have the, yes, I do have somebody with their hand raised. And I will recognize a Tarn, but you're going to have to say your full name and what city you are in before we hear your testimony. So I got a T-A-R-N.
That is correct. Can you hear me?
Yes, and can I get your full name and the city you live in?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Tarn Ohana. I live in Anacortes, Washington. And I happen to say I'm really glad that I was listening into the City Council meeting. I'm glad and thankful that you work hard to make this available to the public for people who can listen in, because I was also unaware of this project. Going in, and I hear a lot of concerned neighbors, and this is my neighborhood as well. But I wanted to say I welcome and am eager to see the city move forward on allowing more neighbors to live in our area. I think this would be a real benefit to our neighborhood and our entire city. Really, that's all I have to say. And I would like to see more communication about it. And I'm excited.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think I've got a Jason Gould. And go ahead, it looks like you're unmuted. All right, name and city, please.
Hello, my name is Jason Gould. I'm a designated managing broker with Realty Real Estate in Anacortes. I was at the planning meeting last week, and a lot of questions were asked to the planning department that Libby was not able to answer because it was before her time. And so I wanted to make sure before the city council makes any vote, they voted on passing a rule for short-term rentals without having the full facts and information. I rose my hand during that meeting to try to answer one of those answers, but it was unable to be answered because it was not during public comment. The residential, as you're aware, the residential zone was already banned for short-term rentals. And one of the arguments was that it was commercial use. Well, the Supreme Court of Washington's already registered that and voted on the fact that short-term rentals are residential in use and not commercial. So to ban the 15-ish units that are in the residential zone or commercial zone is really unnecessary. And there's only about 400 units in that commercial zone. I'm surprised that it's even an emergency. I was looking at the numbers for the housing in Anacortes, and there's the numbers that are on the U.S. Bureau of Statistics. There's 11,500 residential units. There's over 1,400 vacant homes that are not being rented or used in Anacortes. There's over 3,300 rentals in Anacortes. and there's only about 15 units being rented in the commercial zone. That's not really a problem. And people use those housing for intermediate housing while they're looking for long-term housing. And it's a lot less expensive for somebody to rent like an Airbnb because they don't have to come up with first month, last month, and go through a lot of qualifications income-wise. So the benefits of having the short-term rentals available for all housing in Anacortes far outweighs the restrictions of reducing affordable housing. It actually increases the opportunity for affordable housing. But I'd like to see the city council decline that movement in the next couple of weeks and work on moving forward with builders to make more housing.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, come on up. And name and city, please.
Pat Gardner, Anacortes, mayor, council members. Really wasn't going to come up until some of these subjects had caught my attention. Ages ago, last year, whatever, I mentioned to the council regarding MJB property that we are the neighbors to that property, all of us. And there should be some open information to us all, being neighbors, as to the progress and what is going on there. I drive by there and there's constantly utilities and paving and whatnot's going. But I had mentioned or asked that maybe something be posted on that big fence. And I noticed sections of the fence are coming down. But as neighbors, we should know what's going on with the neighbor next door to us, and made public somehow, either in the paper or posted. And I'd appreciate that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, anybody else before I say a couple of things on a few of these subjects? So all of the subjects that were brought up tonight, there will be further public action by council, whether it's MJB or a lease agreement with an outside party. And then I think the short-term rental issue is on the docket for the 18th of March. So, and again, there was action on that in February. But yeah, we will take all these actions, our council will take all these actions up in public with a robust dialogue. All right. Mr. Walters?
To add on a little bit about the Habitat project, if you look in the council packet for the February 20th meeting, there is the presentation, which includes the site plan and the elevation drawings of the proposal. I think we've heard, it's a multifamily building, it's a multifamily project, but the proposal is for 5 cottage houses, which are each single family, and each would be owned, not rented. So I would encourage anybody to take a look at that packet. Very clearly, communication is not our strong suit, but there is information online about the project that people can take a look at. We have taken no action to approve it. We have only given a head nod to Habitat to take a further look at the parcel to see if they could even build that at that location, and see if they want to pursue it.
All right, we will move on to our consent agenda, items 5A, B, and C. Council.
Mayor Miller,
Mr. Young.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Okay, motion by Mr. Young, a second by Ms. Moulton to approve consent agenda 5A through C. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. On to item 6, under other business, item 6A is Solarized Skagit presentation. And I will go ahead and introduce, and even though you told me how to pronounce your last name, Mary Woleb, but I'll let you say it again to make sure we get it right. And I know I'll let you introduce your team, but as you're getting set up there, I will tell council I have seen this presentation. I think it was at the Growth Management Steering Act Committee, perhaps. But anyway, some very interesting technical things, and we saw you here last year, and we're excited to have you back. Mary, council member from LeConner.
Yes.
So welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Again, my name's Mary Wallop, and you did a good job with pronouncing my name. Thank you for inviting me here, Council, Mayor Miller, and the community. I'm here as wearing my other hat, and that as being on the board of the Skagit Valley Clean Energy Alliance. And I also have here a couple other board members, Joan Cross, Mary Lee Chamberlain, and Greg Whiting. And I'll be inviting Greg to speak up on the technical side of things when that comes up. So Skagit Valley Clean Energy Alliance is a 501c3 organization. We're an affiliate of the Skagit Valley Clean Energy Co-op, which is who presented last year. And the reason why we went with a 501c3 is so we could both launch the Solarize campaign, but go for grants for public buildings. And we're working on a couple of them right now. We've been partnering with Olympia Community Solar on the Solarize campaign, who's also a 501c3 nonprofit. What we'll cover today is about how net metering works. I'm going to actually have Greg talk about that, about the Solarize campaign, the 2023 results on the Solarize campaign from last year, 2024 timeline and enrollment, and how Anacortes can help us. Sorry about that. Okay, Greg, have at it.
Hi. One of the things that the state of Washington has done to try to encourage the use of home-based solar energy is to create a program called net metering, wherein the mismatch between the fact that the sun is up for more hours in the summer than in the winter, but Washington power use is more in the winter than the summer, is addressed. And how it works is if you have a solar panel on your house, the amount of energy that you produce is recorded throughout the year, and then there's a true-up at the end of the year, so that during each individual month, if you are overproducing power, you wind up essentially banking that for use in a month when you are underproducing power because the sun isn't up during the hours in which you're using it. The net result of that is that if you size a system for the amount of energy that you use over the entire year, then your Puget bill, or whoever your utility is, it's not just Puget, it's all Washington utilities, your electric bill reflects the fact that you have produced as much as you've consumed, and you wind up paying essentially the electrics, if you're sized to use the amount that, to produce the amount that you use, you wind up getting a bill only for the electric connection charge. Any surplus sort of evaporates from the bank at the end of each year, but if your system is sized well, that's really a very small amount. And this is a mechanism through which the value of the electricity can be realized by the homeowner without being concerned about building a system that's 3 times as big as they actually need just to cover the 3 months during the winter when production is otherwise low. It's a very, very simple concept. A little hard to implement, requires that the utility put a second meter on your solar system and then keep track on your bill every month of how much you've produced and how much you have left in the bank. But it's been very effective, and people that have used it in the state of Washington have indeed seen their bill go down to as basically the $8 a month connection charge. Thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to Mary for the details on how the Solarize program can encourage people to install solar energy on their homes, take advantage of both the tax credit and the ever lower cost of solar energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. benefits of solar. First of all, this is not something that's brand new. It's been around since 2009. I think it started in Portland, very successful down there, and then also it's been over on the East Coast. More locally, there's been a solarized campaign in Queen Anne, Mercer Island, and Whatcom County. So the benefits of the solarized campaign, it's simple, it's affordable, and it provides a sense of security. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. There's a House Bill 2154 on Jay Inslee's desk for consumer protections for solar. And that's happening right now. So it's a one-stop shopping campaign. Pretty much what we've done is we've put out a RFP on the street and have done a rigorous government procurement process to select solar installers. So the customer doesn't have to do that. They sign up online on our website, and an installer comes out and does an assessment. They get a quote. They make a decision whether they want to go to solar or not. And if they decide to go, there's the installation, and then they generate their own clean energy. So affordable, qualify for a 30% federal tax credit. There's no Washington State sales tax. It's a limited time group purchasing rate. And again, financing is available. That's through Puget Sound Community Credit Union. They'd have to qualify, of course, but it's available. That wasn't available last year. I want to take a moment to talk about return on investment on a solarized campaign, or on a solarized situation. So if you've got a typical 1,700 square foot home in Skagit County, it uses about 13,200 kilowatts per year. That equates to about $1,717 a year. With solar, for every 13,200 kilowatts, you'll need 12 kilowatts of solar, and that's at an average price of $2.47. There's a little asterisk there because this year the bids came in much lower than last year. It went from $2.33 to $2.61 per watt. Last year it was $2.81 a watt. So the cost of solar is going down. So if you divide that by the by watt, the cost would be $29,640 less the tax incentive. So the resident is out of pocket $20,748. But the return on investment is such, with the electric bill reduced to $84 a year, they spend about $1,632 annually. That's divided into that $20,748 of their solar investment. So that's a return on investment in 12.7 years. The solar systems have a 25-year warranty, and additionally, it adds to the home value of about 4.1%. It's secure. Again, it's a one-stop shopping with pre-vented installers. And again, there is a House bill that's passed House, the Senate, and is on Jay Inslee's desk now to provide consumer protections for people. And I don't know if you've heard, but there's been some not very reputable solar companies out there, and we want to make sure that people don't have to go through that to produce clean energy. So we do the hard work for them. We negotiate special pricing, and then it's a time-limited campaign. So we host the enrollment, we communicate with our partners, and we evaluate the performance. Okay. So here are some examples of the solarized projects from last year. In Anacortes, Mount Vernon, and LaConner, there's just 3 of the 9 that were installed. So this year, the good news is it's a lower solar cost, between $2.33 to $2.61 versus $2.81. 100% of the materials are made in Washington, and Silfab is located in Burlington. I think it's been there about a year now, so that's pretty cool to have that industry here. Again, financing with Puget Sound Community Credit Union for reduced rate loans. And we've expanded the campaign. Whatcom County wanted to participate this year. Island County, City of Kenmore, and Walla Walla. And of course, Thurston County and Mason County. We're offering additional services, battery backup, level 2 electric charger, vehicle chargers, and then a home energy audits. That's through the Community Energy Challenge and Opportunity for Council and Sustainable Connections. I had this done last year, and it was a very rigorous report, included cost estimates and referrals to contractors. So if I choose to improve the energy efficiency in my own home, I've got a report to do it. I'm almost done. So the timeline, we've already secured the group purchasing contracts. The campaign launched on May 1st. I know Town of LaConner did this, and I'm going to be asking Anacortes as well, is to put the brochures in the utility bills, and so people get that at their home. And then between now and July 4th, the campaign is underway. It's limited to July 4th so that we respect the installer's time frame at the reduced price. But then they can continue installing to the end of the year. Our next steps, we're going to be asking for your help to get the word out through communications channels, your web page, insert in the utility bill. And then if there is a support for insert in the utility bill, we'll need to know the timeline for that and about how many copies we need to make. And that wraps it up. So I'm opening it up for questions and answers.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And I wrote down a question when you gave the or maybe it's just a note that I thought was really interesting, the technology of panels, especially with SILFAB, the 60 watt versus 500 watt generation. I don't know what time frame that is, but exponential of, yeah, that might have been that technical question that I had that I think is worth repeating.
Okay. Back years ago when people first started talking about solar energy, NASA launched the first solar panels on a satellite, and they cost $1 million a watt. And more recently, as we move forward from 1959, I started working for Florida Power and Light in 1999, and we were down to about $1,000 a watt. And the last time I saw a number for the actual solar panel, it was 20 cents a watt. So the public in general has not caught up with the fact, and indeed the utility industry itself has not caught up with the fact that solar energy has become something that is much, much, much cheaper. So the $2.40, $2.60 a watt cost that Mary mentioned that we've been able to get for the Solarize program includes the panels, it includes the installation of the panels, it includes the design of the panels and the structure that supports it on your house, installation of the panels, and the inverters that connect it to the grid, and negotiation with Puget. So there's a lot that goes into it besides just the panels. But nevertheless, $2.50 a watt installed is a tremendous improvement. And Mayor Miller, to your point, the 60-watt panel, the size of a solar panel has been fairly standardized for many years. And in 1999, a solar panel that went onto somebody's house was maybe 20, 30, if you were lucky, 60 watts. Today's panels are indeed 500 watts, and for the same size. If you have a particularly old solar installation, it will probably pay you back to re-solarize and take advantage of the structure that you've already got on your house and the electrical connections, and produce 10 times as much in the same space. And, there are the advantages of the technology are also extending now to battery technology. As Mary mentioned, we're also promoting the idea of putting battery backups for additional resilience in your house. Batteries in 1996 were on the order of $384,000 a watt. Last time I saw a number, a watt hour. Last time I saw a number for a good quality lithium iron phosphate battery, it was $87 a watt hour. So we've also seen a pretty dramatic decrease in the cost of that, to a point where solar plus battery power plants are now starting to outright beat gas and coal plants strictly on cost, before any consideration of the various other factors that go into that decision. So it's a really good time. Obviously, Washington is known for not being sunny, and yet solar energy is now becoming economic here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mayor
All right,
Miller?
Mr. Young.
Thank you. No, I just, I'm a fan. Quite honestly, when we put solar on our house when the program first came out, I do believe, and you were in for 5 years, and they gave you not only the tax deduction, but you also got, I think at that time it was 54 cents per kilowatt hour. So every year you got a refund check, which was great if you produced more than you used. And for us, that was absolutely delicious. That's one of my words I like. But we recently upgraded our solar through the nonprofit, and which was absolutely pre-negotiated, the rates such that, to your point about making sure that everyone was being charged around the same rate, and so that no one was being gouged by the big push for solar in homes and everything else. And while we just completed that probably 4 months ago, or 5 months ago, we also had the opportunity to upgrade our water heater, because the water heater started leaking, and after 15 years, our neighbor's water heater was leaking, and then it was another one, and then ours started leaking. So we did an on-demand system, but it keeps about 5 gallons. And we recently just installed a heat pump into the house. And, what I'm saying all this for is not to tell you all of our business, but the fact that the idea is that through solar generation, it will cover the cost of our heating and cooling, which we didn't have before, but we have that opportunity now, and it's such a wonderful project, and I'm a strong advocate of that. One of the things that I'm hoping that this program gets to eventually is the fact of battery storage, in the sense that battery storage is that if we're generating more power than we're using, which we are, and we only have the connection fee of the $7.99 or $8 for the month, but battery storage would allow us to be able to store power on the battery, and then and at the end of the day, we use that power up, and then we go out to the grid. That would be ideal, but it seems that that concept is not yet allowed. So if you would speak a little to that, but honestly, it is one of the best decisions we made. The investment and return on investment has been extraordinarily clear and been swift, and it's just been a wonderful thing.
Thank you. Well, and in the future, we're going to be looking at that in partnership with Olympia Community Solar. Batteries, again, right now are kind of pricey, and the technology is changing too. So, in next year, it's probably going to look different.
Any other questions?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
So thank you very much for your presentation. What I really like about it is that it provides citizens with a choice. Yeah. And I think that having a choice on whether you want to have solar power or whether you want to have electric energy or whatnot, I think that is a great thing. Anytime we can give people a choice. I'm curious to know to me, it's a big win. It's something I'd probably consider doing in my house. I'm curious, in the other municipalities that you've done this in, what have you found to be the biggest obstacle for people to take advantage of it?
Well, a couple. First of all, I can't have solar on my house because it's too shady. So in the future, I'm hoping that we'll have a community solar program where I can buy into a community solar and then get the benefits on my bill, tax bill. So that's hopefully in the future. The other challenge was last year, we didn't have the partnership with the bank, and a lot of people don't have $20,000 hanging around. So this year we have that, and that was an obstacle. And the other obstacle was we just started too late. So we're now out in front of the jurisdictions in March instead of May, And, you know, again, getting support to get the brochure and the utility inserts really made a difference. And those jurisdictions that did that last year, they really got good return. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Other questions?
Anything else? All right, well, thank you very much, and we'll get the word out.
And I'm going to leave some of these on the back table, and I'm going to have you pass these out.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are on to item 6B. This is Commercial Avenue Complete Streets Project Phase 1 update. And Mr. Raham's going to introduce, and I'll just go ahead and say it out loud because I'm thinking it, also known as the Safeway Roundabout. Mr. Raham, introduce the team.
Sorry, I'm just making sure this loads. Mayor Council, Andy Raham, Public Works Director. I'm here to introduce Alta and TSI. We have Michelle Mock from TSI. Back there. Okay, there we go. Brandon Gonzalez with Alta, and then Adrian Esteban with Alta. And like the mayor said, we're going to talk about the 12th and Commercial, also known as the Safeway Roundabout. The council asked them to come and present. This is hopefully we're hoping this is where we can get the final direction, and we need to go to 100% design. We need to go to construction before the end of the year, or we will lose funding from some funding, sorry, not all funding, but some funding from Washington Department of Transportation. So, Councilmember Hubick, you are able to see the image of the project?
It looks fantastic, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Just orientation for the general public. Safeway is this big white roof right here. This is Safeway parking lot. This is Oaks heading out to the ferry. This is Commercial coming into town, and that's going into the downtown core. So with that, I will hand over the microphone. We didn't get a lot of questions, so it's more like, what would you like to ask, basically, type of presentation.
Thank you. Good to see you, Mayor Miller and Council. And as Andy just mentioned, we spent today basically on site looking at the design, walking the corridor, looking at kind of some of the details of the corridor, and really wanted to use this as an opportunity to take questions and give you a really quick update on you know, how things have been progressing over at least the past couple months since we spoke to you in the fall. A couple quick updates, and then love to just take any questions that you have at this point. First is when we were here in the fall, we had submitted the plan to WashDOT for channelization approval. It can be a several month-long process, but if you're familiar with kind of design process, it's around a 30% design is essentially when we are getting approval from WashDOT on the channelization plan. Since then, we did receive comments back from WashDOT, and we have been working to address those comments, and we're preparing for our second submission to WashDOT. Generally speaking, I think that we typically have around 3 to 4 cycles of responses with WashDOT as we get channelization plan approval. To give you a little bit of an idea of where we are in that process, again, we're about to submit for the second round of review from WashDOT. Generally speaking, the comments that we've received from WashDOT, I don't like to say they're minor, but they haven't been significant in regards to the design. It's been relatively minor details rather than substantive changes to the design at this point. So that's been the feedback so far from WashDOT. So that's one major update. A second is on the right-of-way side. You authorized, I believe it was last month, a contract ability for us to execute into a full contract with a right-of-way consultant. For us, there are some details that we can look at in terms of right-of-way, but it's not really until we get into that 60% design that we can nail down the specifics of right-of-way acquisition realities and costs. And so what that contract allowed us to do is our subconsultant is going to be looking at appraisal process and some other initial steps that can at least start to quantify what those right-of-way costs might be. And again, nailing down the design really is part of the 60% process that we're about to start with your consent. That is really where we can get into a lot more of the details on what that right-of-way cost might look like. And the third is on the traffic side. So one of the things that we wanted to look at was the ingress egress into the Safeway parking lot. What we did, it was about 2 years ago now when we started the actual design, is a traffic analysis. And I think we mentioned this in the last call and in other updates that we looked at a variety of different options. One of the potential options was closing off the Safeway parking lot entrance. As I mentioned, in the last update, that really causes a lot of pressure to the 11th and Commercial intersection. If we were to do that, it would take it from its current status, I believe, as a B to a failing grade, essentially from a traffic standpoint. So that was one, reality. But then the others that I think you brought up at our last update was the queuing from 12th into Safeway, and kind of the realities of, let's just say that there was somebody doing a drop-off at the front of Safeway and what the implications of that might be backing into 12th or Commercial or into Commercial. And so we were trying to observe a little bit of that behavior today. We did see a few drop-offs. They were relatively quick. In a couple situations, or one situation, we had 2 cars essentially queuing behind it, but we at least visually didn't observe a significant impact at that point. And now with kind of getting washout comments and kind of the next phase of at least the traffic analysis is we want to remodel that and also look at any additional thoughts that you had. We want to incorporate that into our traffic analysis. And then also take a look at the 11th and Commercial intersection for the potential of a 4-way stop. That was one thing that we also wanted to look at, and we're collecting kind of comments in order to do the traffic analysis all in one sweep, looking at that option as well. A couple other things that we as a team were talking about while we were on site and kind of observing the traffic patterns at that intersection. A lot of the queuing, or kind of we kind of call it a platoon of vehicles that you typically see with a traditional signal. So when you get a green, there's typically several vehicles that might be waiting and queued, waiting for that green, and you see them come through in sort of a motion with a number of cars, sort of like a caravan of cars. With the design of a roundabout, the intention of it is to sort of break those up so that we don't see this caravan of vehicles coming in. And so that's just one thing to kind of consider, that the difference between the signalized intersection that you see today and a roundabout that is designed to keep that flow of traffic moving. The other comment, and I would defer to Michelle, later if she'd like to speak to this, is that roundabouts are also designed to be really efficient. And there's a roundabout that she was working on where it was adjacent to a railroad. And so you have, or not adjacent, but there was a railroad barrier. So you have long periods of stops, the queuing would back up, but the roundabout actually alleviated the queuing of the vehicles when there was a hard stop due to a passing train in a pretty quick manner. And again, they're designed to be efficient for vehicular traffic. So those were a few things that we were talking about as we were out on site. So with that, that was really just more of the casual update on where we're at and some of the observations from our site visit today, and would love any questions that you have at this point.
All right. I know council's been chomping at the bit to ask you questions, especially in front of the public, but I usually go to the public first to see if they want to chime in before I turn it over to council. If anybody wants to weigh in, yeah, sure, come on up.
Jerry Ziegler from Anacortes. One of the questions I would have is whether or not it's been considered to make the roundabout by Safeway a one-way entrance into the Safeway parking lot and use the other streets as the exit corridor, which would reduce the traffic load in that particular area. I think it would simplify quite a bit what the traffic issues might be at some time in the future. So I would suggest that as maybe an alternative.
Thank you. Yeah, sure, come on up.
Pat Gardner, Anacortes Mayor, council members. I'm dreaming. Can Safeway move to MJB Properties and turn that into an event center? Because the traffic around Safeway isn't going to get any better as this town grows. That parking lot, I avoid it like crazy. I don't get near it. But that Safeway it's an old building. It's been there a while, as long as I can remember. And I'm just thinking, I'm dreaming. And I just thought I'd put my dream to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Council, I feel like I've asked every question of Alta, but I know there's still some burning questions left. So.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
So actually, I reviewed the minutes from the August 21 meeting, which was the meeting you referenced last time you were here, I think. And one of our questions was, what about making it an exit only onto the roundabout from Safeway? So prohibiting the entrance from the roundabout into Safeway, which would eliminate the queuing problem that we perceive. You might not, but we live here. How would that work? Have you seen that elsewhere? I haven't seen a Safeway, being the only grocery store in town, right on the highway almost anywhere else. I mean, usually there's quite a distance from the main drag to the front door of the big grocery store in town. So does this work? Does this improve things? I wouldn't anticipate that closing only one aspect, the in versus the out, I wouldn't anticipate that would put a whole lot of pressure on 11th and Commercial, because you would assumedly make a right turn to then come in the back of the Safeway parking lot instead of the front. So tell me what you think.
So we can definitely run the model for that to see what, I can't speak to it without having the actual model, run for traffic, but we can certainly look at, either ingress only and removing egress, or even vice versa, just seeing what would happen if we allow ingress but remove egress. So we can definitely look into that with the traffic model that we're about to do, and if that's your direction for us on that.
So you ran a number of models, but that's not one of them that
Correct.
you did?
We have not looked at that one.
So this is something we asked about in August, and it is now March, and now we're up against a shot clock to spend the money. What have we learned since August?
Since August, so the channelization plan was really a hold for us. There's not a lot that we can do from a design perspective until we get the first round of comments from WashDOT. So that was the first thing, is waiting for the channelization plans from WashDOT. At the same time, we also had a contract amendment to continue the work on the project through 60%. So that was another piece of it. And what we're doing right now is trying to collect any of your direction. Again, I know that was a comment that you made on running for the traffic analysis. Any other comments that we have, because we are preparing to do that traffic analysis at this point.
Okay, so 11th and Commercial was also something noted in the minutes in the August meeting. I'm not sure any of us are excited about a four-way stop at 11th and Commercial. Is that what you had suggested was one possibility?
It is a possibility that we do want to assess.
What about simply prohibiting left turns?
11th southbound onto Commercial?
North and southbound Commercial Avenue onto 11th.
It's something that we can look at. And again, that was, for running the traffic model for those are the scenarios that we can assess. The first one we were looking at is a four-way stop. There's a couple of reasons for it. First is sightline visibility. When we look at the new design of that intersection, vehicular traffic is set back a little bit farther from the intersection. And so when we were out there looking at it, and it's just something that we've been wanting to run for a little while, is the sightline visibility might preclude somebody that is on 11th from being able to see north and southbound vehicular traffic on Commercial. So one possible solution for that is to do a four-way stop in order to improve safety at that location. The flip side of that is we have to see what the queuing implications might be, because we want to avoid any kind of a queuing situation from 11th southbound into the roundabout. So those are things that we have to look at. So if you'd like us to look at that, we'd be happy to also suggest or look at no left turns and see what that might imply.
And the situation that you're describing is caused by the changes that you're proposing to make in sort of the bulb outs here at 11th, right?
Yes, sir. In part it is, but also one of the things we observed today is that the stop bar in the current build is roughly right where you see the proposed crosswalk. And under numerous times, we stood on this corner for a while and watched multiple vehicles actually proceed over the stop bar, and in some cases by an entire vehicle length, in order to see which both directions. So there's a current sightline visibility issue there at that location.
And so is it desirable here why is it desirable to eliminate the second lane headed northbound Commercial Avenue into 11th. Because right now, between 12th and 11th, there's a second lane turns right to go down 11th, headed eastbound. Why is it desirable to eliminate that lane?
In this situation, it's primarily from a design perspective as we're transitioning at the roundabout into the two-lane kind of context that continues down into downtown. So that's been the main thing, is from a contextual urban design perspective, the downtown kind of transition really begins at that roundabout. So that's the primary reason for doing it.
Rather than at the arch, because that's another obvious dividing line, right?
Yep.
The arch instead of the roundabout.
Okay, I'm sure other council members have questions, comments, or maybe we've expended them all. Mr. Young.
Thank you. I am by nature glass half full. I am. And, I like that because it allows me to explore all the other possibilities as I sort of compare the things. I'm supportive, but I am not convinced that sometimes things like this can be a solution in search of a problem. But in this case, I think that although you came on Monday, I think Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays are the real, massive crowd at Safeway. And, so I still think that will be a concern, and I know that you've addressed it. And, and from what you've stated, I can also tell that you have really heard the discussions and, really tried to integrate that into your presentation and also, sort of allay some of the concerns that we're having about it. Although I agree, like Mr. Walters and probably many others, as well as Ms. Garner, I still have grave concerns about the traffic when it comes to ferry traffic and summer traffic, and all trying to get around that roundabout. And then those that love the deals that they get at Safeway, so most people want to come and park up front and let somebody jump out. And so I really have concerns that if we have both way traffic coming in and out of Safeway, I really do think that it's going to be a nightmare and that we would end up having to fix it. But, I'm open to the possibilities. And I think that, although we are under a time crunch, as my colleague has indicated, I really do think that we really have to consider the options. And it may mean that part of this spills over to other streets in order to make it happen. But what we're stuck with right now is that Safeway don't want to move. I wish they would consider that too. That would be dreaming, wonderfully so. But they're one of the largest performers. So, they want to keep things the way that they are. What business wouldn't? But what we have to consider as a city is what is in the best interest of our constituency and citizenry. And so I think that those other options have to be on the table. I don't know what we need to do in order to be able to move it forward quickly, but I really do think that we have to exercise the due diligence to consider it, because any other way, I honestly believe, ask anybody in Anacortes, Safeway in that little lane right there, when people can let somebody off, it's a hot mess. So I don't think Monday is your measure. I think that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, even the Sunday, is a greater measure of what that little area will be like in the backup.
I kind of heard, can you model it on a Friday of a summer weekend where Monday's the holiday?
Mayor Miller.
Ms. Hubick, and then I think Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. So to piggyback off of Councilmember Young, we've got 2 of the 4 ferries that hold 144 vehicles, and that doesn't count anyone that's come on as a passenger and has their car parked. So part of my question does relate to, what does it look like on a Friday or a Thursday between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. when you have both of those 144 car ferries coming in on the summer reservation schedule, one behind the other. My question too is, I guess, also around whether or not any of the recommendations might come back to us around adjusting timing of lights, recommending alternative traffic flow recommendations on maybe adding stoplights somewhere. I do worry about summer traffic. I do worry about ferry traffic, and even though the ferry schedules are getting better, sometimes they're inconsistent, and we just haven't always had the best ability to plan around them.
I don't know if that was a question, but you can go ahead and try to respond.
Yeah, the one comment I just wanted to make is that when we ran the initial traffic analysis, that was something that we took into consideration, is looking at essentially the eastbound flow of traffic to southbound commercial. There was an animation that we did to sort of reflect that traffic volumes. So, I completely understand that that's a major concern. It's something we've been thinking about as we've gone through the design process, and it's something that was reflected, at least in that initial traffic analysis.
Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Nice to see you again. I also would like to see the ingress only and egress only options explored. I hadn't really thought of the ingress only, but that really does make sense for people coming from the direction of the ferry, coming westbound. But things really do snarl up there right at the beginning of where people turn in. And there's already anyway, it's just a snarly mess. And I don't know if when people come in, they have to keep going forward, and then they can take a left to park. I don't know if it would make sense to have the parking angled in the other direction on that first row adjacent to commercial, if people could sort of get out of the way there and park. And of course, that's a question for Safeway too, and who knows, but people are forced to go a little bit further, and then they have to wait for the people that are in front of the store crossing with their carts, letting off their person. And it really snarls like crazy a lot. So anything to alleviate that. It's just hard for me to picture this being one lane and people feeding in there and then having to stop. It just seems really hard to picture it not backing up for me. And then as far as 11th Street, yeah, I'd be curious about what you come up with there as well.
All right, I'll pause the council. Oh, go ahead. Mr. Gonzalez, did you have a response there?
No, I would throw out one thing just really quickly that we talked about today while we were on site, is that, currently on this side driveway for Safeway, I think there's the kind of order online pickup spots here. Currently the flow of traffic is northbound, but one thing that we thought might be beneficial is to revert that to southbound, because you would have folks exiting the roundabout with the potential to immediately go southbound. There would be some, parking, but then also, if Safeway decided to keep the kind of pickup spots there, it'd make a lot of sense. Then they would continue and leave the site. But that doesn't address your question of, I think it was over here on this side.
It was actually that southern side you just mentioned, and also look at the northern side. And in combination with that, if you have parked in either one of those areas currently, if you're trying to get out onto commercial in 12, you can be backed up 3 or 4 cars down that. And then people are coming from the east, people are coming from the north, and people are coming from the south, and they all converge. So that's messy also. So, yeah.
All right, I'll pause on the council comments because I missed an online commenter, Natalie Clark, I believe. And again, please state your name and city you live in.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Go ahead.
This is Natalie Clark. I'm a resident of Hidalgo Island. I'm unfortunately right outside of city limits, so I don't get that sweet broadband or city plumbing. But I do own a business in downtown Anacortes, one gorgeous block away from where you guys are sitting now. I own Sugar Mama Cafe. We're in our first year of being open, and we are in our first winter in a tourist town. And all I can say is ouch. the traffic toward downtown has definitely been affected, not only, of course, by tourist season being down, but by the construction on Otter. People kind of hit their forget it point when they go through 3 lights, and it takes 15 minutes when they're used to breezing through them in a couple. I'm terrified that this project is going to happen during tourist season. And we've already seen 2 restaurants downtown close just in 2024. If this happens during tourist season, you will see so many more of us go under. Anacortes has positioned itself as a tourist town. I know myself, I employ 13 people, most of whom live here in Anacortes. If we want to be a destination city, we have to make sure that we protect our downtown core. It's already so easy to go to the ferry and never come downtown. I can only imagine if we're routing traffic all the way up to D before they even get to the north end of Commercial, what that's going to be like for us business owners in the downtown area. So I'm not going to weigh in on the traffic circle thing. I think we've got a lot of them, and it's a little weird. But our city is charming and quirky, and I love that about it. What I would like to say is please, please, please consider our downtown businesses as we look at the timing of this, and let's maybe make sure that whoever we contract with to build this, there's some teeth in our contract to make sure that they get it done before tourist season starts if we are in fact doing it in the off season. That's all from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. Okay, back to council.
Mayor
question.
Miller.
Mr. Fantini.
First, I just wanted to say before I ask my questions that I appreciate the fact that as we spoke a lot of communication about things that are going on in Anacortes. Thank you, Mayor Miller, for sending me that email that there is an entire web page on the City Council website called Commercial Avenue Complete Street Project that people can watch, and they can see all of the public meetings. They can read all of the public comments, of which I did this weekend. And so I just think that's really helpful to let the public know who might just be tuning in for the first time about this issue, that there's a whole webpage about it, and it's super informative and super easy to navigate. It's also quite long because there's been a lot of discussion about it. My questions come, and I did see you, I work down on Commercial and 12th actually also at the bank there, and I saw you folks out there today walking around and looking at things, and my first thought also was, wow, they're looking at this on a non-rain day and a non-weather day. I mean, we had snow this morning, but I felt like that. I was like, oh, I wish they were there on a day when it was a little bit more active, so I would encourage that as well. I also, to Mr. Walters and several others' points, am very much in favor of exploring that one-way into Safeway. And I think that I understood that we'll kind of see that as a model as part of the next round.
Yes, sir.
Is that okay? And then I also very much support the 4-way stop at 11th Street. And the reason for that is because I feel like as we are making all of these changes to that area, encouraging more bike traffic, encouraging more pedestrian traffic, yes, it may be a little inconvenient for folks to stop at an intersection again, but it'll be a whole lot safer. And that's something that I think is definitely an option worth exploring, and I might also be one of those people that creep past that stop bar to get a look down, because you can't see it very well. I'm gonna take a little different opinion on the ferry traffic. So I commute in every day at 8:30, get stuck in the ferry frequently, coming in from the West Streets. And I actually find that by the time you get down to the Commercial area, the traffic has kind of dissipated a little bit. It doesn't seem to be as crowded from the ferry as when it is, say, around 12th and D. I think 12th and D is where it really slams up and you're just stopped and you can't move for a while, whereas by the time we get down to Commercial. So I have a little less worry about that. When it comes to the summer months, I don't feel like there's any solution we're going to come up with that is going to alleviate the problem with summer traffic. I think that's always going to be an issue. I would encourage, to Ms. Clark's point, and this is something that I wrote down earlier, we do have a lot of businesses down in that area, and I do think it's important. I had wrote down, when would this happen? When would we start construction? Like, about how long would it take? And that might not be something that you can inform us in right now, but I don't know if you have any idea of that, because I do think it's really important in a town like this, where we do have a lot of small businesses. We've just seen recently with our avenue having really kind of constricted some of that, but we're almost done there. So I'm just, do you know when that would happen, or?
So is just making sure the question is about, construction timing? Yeah, so realistically, our next milestone is to get to 60% design. We're still a couple of months away from that. And then we would get into final design. So that would likely be towards the end of this year. Trying to get into a bid, if we do late this year to allocate the funding, and then construction would theoretically start, a couple months after a bid. So we'd be looking at early 2025 before we could realistically start construction. At that point, and Adrian, feel free to chime in too a little bit if kind of on the length of construction, but would you say about 6 months construction? So, if we're really to start in the beginning of 2025, assume a 6 month construction, we are starting to get into that summer window. So that is something that, I know we've talked about before, that if this did hit during tourist season, obviously that's a busy time of year, and it's also has huge, economic impacts for businesses. So, hear that loud and clear, and we would have to look at what that kind of mitigation might look like.
Okay, and then just one other question. Is there any kind of, and I really don't mean this to be tongue-in-cheek, but like, do you have, and this might not be your area, but how do you educate citizens on the proper use of a roundabout? Because I feel like one of the reasons, and I'm really not trying to be funny, it's a legitimate question. One of the things that we see a lot of times is folks just don't understand how to use them.
No, it's actually, that's a good point, and you're not alone in that. Roundabouts are still relatively new for a lot of communities. And so what I've seen is a kind of a public service campaign, if you will, around etiquette in roundabouts, use of roundabouts. That's a big part of it, is just kind of championing and educating around roundabouts. I've even seen examples of where in, high schools as part of, driver's education, and even just kind of other types of classes where they'll educate students around, driving age students around roundabouts to start to build that culture. And then the other big thing is like, as something's new, the more that we build them, the more people start to familiarize with them. So it is a little bit of that culture change in behavior. But there's definitely campaigns that I've seen done to try to educate, drivers on best practices and use.
Okay. And
we just keep building them in Anacortes.
Yeah, right. And last question. When so I look down here and I see that it looks like kind of where it's speckled in certain areas. Are those like where the curb cuts are going to stay? Or like, is there a plan for that at all? Like specifically on the non-Safeway side of the street that kind of runs along there. I know there's some inns there right now. Is that like a curb cut where you're pointing right now? And then on the next block this way, are they keeping all those curb cuts?
So this one is a shared curb cut, so it would be a shared driveway there. The design has changed slightly from this one. Over the past month, we were looking at SIBOs, and they have a current ingress-egress driveway right there. And our current design is showing a right out only for SIBOs, so that they would be able to go to the roundabout and have circular traffic there. But yep, you nailed it. Those are the ingress-egress points in the driveways. All of them are staying with the exception of this one here for Safeway, at least that I can recall. And we had an early conversation with Safeway, I think it was back in 2020, 2021, and they were okay with us blocking off that one drive as long as we preserved access to this parking on this side.
Great, thank you.
So I know there's still a lot more questions. I want to make sure you also captured Mr. Fantini's point, I think, about the four-way stop at 11th, if we can model that one as well in various versions.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
My perception of the issue at 11th and Commercial is cars, especially coming southbound on Commercial Avenue, will get bound up there at high-profile times of day, 5 p.m., whatever, which is the only times of day that matter, right? Because most of the time, there's plenty of capacity on all the streets in town. We're only planning for the busy times of day. So at the busy times, cars try to turn left to go east on 11th. cars are coming the opposite direction, so they can't turn left. So, you know, it starts to back up quite a ways up up Commercial Avenue. And you can have the opposite problem going the opposite direction too. So that is the primary concern there. I guess a stop sign could help alleviate that. I'm sort of unconvinced about that, but with respect to stop signs, don't we have to, I mean, aren't we supposed to identify how many cars are traveling through the intersection and compare it to the traffic manual?
We do assess that as part of the overall assessment of vehicular traffic and kind of implications there.
And have we done that at this point?
You know, that's all part of that traffic analysis that we'll be doing for 11th. We've done the overall traffic analysis to look at the modeling of the 12th and Commercial intersection, but specifically to 11th, other than the implications of closing off the driveway and what that traffic might look like, the implications, we have not modeled the four-way stop yet.
Okay. I mean, I know everybody says, you know, people have trouble with roundabouts. People have trouble with four-way stops. You know, maybe especially here. Well, wait a minute, who got here first? You know, so at least you're stopped. So, you know, so you're going pretty slowly when you start off again. I definitely want to see us model egress only from the Safeway parking lot into the roundabout. I think ingress would be much worse, would not solve the problem. Egress has some possibilities there, and if it's egress only, I don't think you have to reverse the direction of the parking lot on the west side of Safeway. I think then that might be just fine. Yeah. I don't know why Safeway necessarily gets a say in this. I mean, we should take all opinions, but we have to design the best layout for traffic flow. And it just seems to me that bringing people into their parking lot further away from the front door is more desirable. I mean, if they enter off of 11th, if you drive down one aisle, you're gonna pass 40 stalls that hopefully one of them will suit your fancy and you'll park in, and then not circulate all the way around the parking lot. I definitely want to see that. And I also want to understand, what are the inputs into the traffic model? I mean, models are only as good as what the inputs are, among other things. So how do we know that the model will be correct?
Yeah, so I'm not the traffic engineer that would run the model, so I can't speak to the data points that, you know, actually go into the model itself. But we're probably about a month away from being able to have the results of all the modeling that's going to happen here. And at that point, you know, I would invite him to come speak to council on the results of the traffic model, but also, you know, things like your question, Councilman Walters, on the inputs into it. But typically we're looking at, you know, PM peak, ADT volumes, and then with AM, PM peak considerations.
Okay, and then we had at 11th and Commercial at some point had some discussion about a raised table intersection where pedestrians don't have to go down to the street, where they stay at the level of the sidewalk when they go across the street. Are we still considering anything like that?
That is still the current design.
It's the design. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. I don't think that I necessarily understood that it was part of the current design or not. And then finally, one other thing that we did talk about in August and is in the minutes is the idea that the view corridor down Commercial Avenue is sort of important, because we have talked about capturing traffic that's going out to the ferry. That was the whole point of the arch that we built a number of years ago. But with this channelization plan, you know, we curve around to the left and then we come back over to the right. It's hard for me to visualize. What does it look like? I mean, are people going to see the arch when they come down the street? Or are they going to be kind of looking off to the left and then maybe back to the right? Now we're in a roundabout and we're not looking at anything else. Or are we going to lose it has limited utility, but it has some utility. Are we going to lose the arch as the gateway because people just aren't going to see it as they're going around the roundabout? Do we know?
So I will speak to one of the benefits, I think. Well, first of all, the curvature is for traffic calming, to try to slow vehicular traffic.
Oh, I understand why. Yeah, I think that's good.
So, you know, as a vehicular traffic northbound, so the arch is over here at 11th. As they're going through the roundabout and entering the roundabout, they'll have the view corridor of the arch itself. And the landscaping is actually in this piece right here. So it's offset to the west of the center of the intersection. So, you know, the view corridor from that perspective, I would assume you would still be able to see it. But the other main thing that we talked about from the inception of this project is that the design of it and sort of the overall look and feel should be the extension of downtown and sort of pulling it towards commercial or towards 12th. That way people can really start to see that this is you're entering downtown Anacortes, that change of feel and character. And that would also sort of point to, you know, a kind of gateway entrance into downtown along with the entrance feature. So I think that urban design is a critical part of making that happen. One thing that we've also floated around, and we haven't gotten any specifics, is what type of art or kind of feature could be included in the center of the roundabout. That could also be something that ties people and pulls people into kind of that, in urban design, call it like the feeling of arrival into the downtown area. So there's other things that we could consider.
What could we accomplish in the center?
Landscaping, there could be public art. It's actually a fairly decent sized area here that you could use for some sort of kind of gateway feature. This area outside of the circle is actually the apron. We have to keep that for, you know, larger truck turning movements. But there is a sizable public art opportunity in the center of the roundabout.
Could you do a fountain?
Conceivably, yes, but I would want to verify that we can actually make that happen based on spacing standards. But conceivably, it seems like it would be large enough to be able to do something.
We do have
not a large one, but it would at least
Sure.
give you the space to do something.
We do have a pretty active and energized downtown association and people adjacent to that right now, and some have suggested that. Okay, thank you.
So I've got a couple of, I'll take a pause from council. I know a couple of council members haven't had a chance to weigh in, so I got a couple raised hands. I'll go with John Hine first. And you're unmuted.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you great.
I appreciate your time. I just have this might be an ignorant question, but has anybody considered just closing off the egress and ingress on 12th into Safeway and designing the parking lot in a different way where people, even if you had the roundabout with that, you could still have 2 lanes. People could go around the roundabout, go around, take a right on 11th and pull into the parking lot, and also go out the west side parking lot where the pickup zone is right now, take a right, hit the roundabout and go back up 12th. Has anybody considered that?
Mr. Gonzalez, did we look at that model where we closed that off? I can't remember.
So make sure I'm following it. It was
Yeah.
still closing off the entrance into Safeway.
Completely,
right?
I believe.
Completely closing that off and then basically using 11th as ingress egress into Safeway. We did look at that, and it was problematic for the 11th and commercial intersection. Traffic volumes, I mean, we kind of alluded to the traffic that goes in and out of Safeway. Putting that over on 11th, ironically, traffic analysis would look at that and say a roundabout might actually be a good solution to flow the traffic there. So it would cause significant issues at 11th.
Cutting that off would create another roundabout downstream. At least that was the analysis. Okay, I've got a Barb Smart who would like to weigh in as well. And
I'm there.
Yep, I can hear you now.
Barbara Smart from Anacortes. I live up on 32nd and D, and if you notice, if you ever drive through there, you see a whole lot of tire tracks across the roundabout where the buses come, the trucks come, that can't quite make the roundabout, the real street part of it. So if you keep putting like a fountain or you put a lot of raised area in there, you're also cutting here we are learning how to use a roundabout, and you are cutting people's visual line of sight What do I have to worry about? Do I have to stop and not get hit by the guy coming out of Safeway or going into Safeway or going into any of these areas? That, I mean, the one when you first come into town, that's okay because I just think it's got too much stuff, too many vegetation and stuff. But having a fountain there, all I know is the one that I saw in Bellevue, Illinois, had a big fountain on there, and every year somebody drove into the fountain because they're not paying attention. But anyway, just if the roundabouts aren't wide enough for big trucks and the semis to come through, which they're all going off into the ferry. And also, one more thing, since I'm rambling. On 32nd and M, the new roundabout, that is like the most dangerous roundabout we have in town. Those people who are zipping on M don't really slow down because they don't see who's coming down 32nd. So line of sight is extremely important, especially you got a bunch of old codgers living in town that are having a tough time with roundabouts. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for your comments. All right, so Ms. Cleveland McGrath or Mr. McDougall, you haven't weighed in on this one yet.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. McDougall.
Yeah, so the current downtown, we have bike lanes on either side that I think come to an end around either 10th or 11th. I don't recall bike lanes being incorporated in this design. I was wondering, though, if you could speak to that and also kind of how the design facilitates both pedestrian and bike flow.
Yeah, well, great question. And one of the kind of cornerstones, I think, of this design is looking at, bicycle and pedestrian improvements. And what we've actually done is, kind of thinking about this couple section as being a possible prototype for the rest of Commercial Avenue, at least at some point in the future. We've included protected bike lanes, so they're actually separated by a curb. I'm going to show you this piece down here. So you essentially have a travel lane, you'll have the curb, you'll have an area of landscaping, which is that dark color is the landscape zone, and then you're going to have the bike facility. And then you'll have the pedestrian facility basically is that kind of spotted color. So the bicycle and pedestrian facilities are separate, but then we call it a mixing zone as it goes into the roundabout. So that's where bicycle and pedestrian traffic would share the same space. I believe for the most part, it's around a 10, and in some cases where we have the space, it's a 12-foot wide bicycle and pedestrian shared space. I think mostly on the east side where we have, west side where we have a little bit more room. So let's just pretend you're a cyclist. You go northbound. You would ramp up essentially to have be at the curb level. You would cross here. You'd have the shared space go around the roundabout. You would continue on, and then you would go into your own separated bicycle space. You would cross at the intersection with the cross bike, the green paint, and then you would continue on with the surface level bicycle facility.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
Following up on that question, when a bicyclist is on that shared space and then gets to the crosswalk across the Safeway entrance, we've had some issues with people at the crossing at 22nd and R when they're coming on the Tommy Thompson and then they go left there. That feels kind of hazardous. And in this case, again, as we talk about how snarly it is at that spot, that just seems really dicey. For me personally, I would just blaze on down the traffic lane because that to me would feel safer and I would be way less likely to hit a pedestrian, and cars are hopefully going to be slow enough where I'm not slowing anyone down either. But I could see for, families or people that are not willing to take that on and be in the midst of traffic, that might be, but do you have examples of, or have you seen examples besides the one I mentioned on R? Because it's just a little tricky at that point for people, I think. For cars too, they're not always going to be looking for someone to cross when they're trying to get in or out of Safeway.
No, so a couple points just to make on that is one of the things in an initial iteration of the roundabout that we looked at is trying to keep bicycle and pedestrian facilities separate throughout the entire roundabout. Obviously, that was going to be, I think, a 116-foot diameter roundabout, so we weren't able to do that due to a lot of right-of-way considerations, so we scaled it back. I completely agree with you that that corner is fairly sharp. One thing that we could look at is to soften that out just a little bit. The reality is that if we were to soften this turn out just a little bit, it would be more right-of-way that we would need to acquire from Safeway. I don't necessarily can't speak to if that's an issue or not, but it's something that we could definitely look at. If we were to get a little bit more right-of-way at this corner, we would be able to soften that turn as you kind of do the crossing here, and then also on this side as well. And then on the taking the lane comment, so what we were thinking about is the protected bicycle facility is what we call all ages and abilities. It has the curb separation that allows for people, like you mentioned, with families, they feel more comfortable being fully separated from traffic to use the bike lane. But one thing that we were talking about on site today is that, stronger, we call them fearless cyclists, would likely, like you said, just continue riding in the lane. And so we want to make that transition point back here at the 13th Street intersection to put, there's sharrows or other things that we could do to guide a cyclist that wanted to take the lane, and it would be an easy transition at this point to use the lane as they kind of either go westbound on 12th or continue northward and can meet up with the bike lane north of 11th.
And again, what we're looking at is a 30%, correct?
Correct.
30% design.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
Just a question about signage. So I know that the roundabout at M and 32nd has a lot of signage. Seems like a lot of unnecessary signage. Do you know if in the next version of what we'll see, if we'll see kind of like a planned signage model at all? Or because I mean, obviously we want to keep this very welcoming and down home, so to speak.
Yeah. There is a signing and striping plan that we would do as part of it to show where all the different signage would be. In terms of less signage, Michelle, I don't know if that's something you can chime in at all. I know that there's kind of the regulatory signage that we have to use, and that's kind of the balance between what we need to or what we're required to do from MUTCD, and then also, I get it, the visual clutter that can sometimes create.
Yeah, I feel like when it's on a state route, I've got to put some extra signs there.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon. You pretty much addressed it. There are some MUTCD and WashDOT requirements for signage, but I agree with you. There can be a sign farm syndrome that kind of goes out there where a lot of things get missed. So definitely we'll try to stick to what is required and not oversign things.
Will we see that sign plan in a 60% design, or is that?
Yes, sir. At 60%, there would be a signing and striping plan.
Thank you.
All right. Lots of great questions and great comments from the public, as there should be, with the most visible and busiest intersection in all of our fair city. So yeah, we're going to continue to ask questions and solicit comments, but I think we're moving forward with the 60% design, and you'll be coming back fairly soon.
Yes, sir. I think, if I could just say one last comment is, I think that, like I said, we are really close to being able to run the traffic model, so I think that that's going to be starting over the next couple weeks. So if it would be beneficial for council, happy to come back and we can go through that assessment of all the different alternatives that we've been talking about for the past couple months, and bring the traffic engineer in again to just be able to answer questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Very informative. Okay, we are on to item 6C, and this is ordinance 4074, Title IX update. This is a discussion item with possible action and open for public comment. And we've seen this item before, but Ms. Swetnam, I think, is going to kick it off.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Miller and members of council and members of the audience. So this is the second read of Ordinance 4074, which was presented a couple of weeks ago that would create the crime of disorderly conduct and provoking assault in the Anacortes Municipal Code, which had previously been in the code, but was removed during the pretty extensive Title IX update that we did last year. So the only change in the draft from the last, and I apologize, this does not show the track changes, but the only change from the previous draft was changing this language. The previous draft said something to the effect of shall be found fighting in the city, and the suggestion was made that we should adjust that language to better align with what the state statute on disorderly conduct has, and this was language that I pulled directly from the RCW section. So it's just the replacement of that shall be found fighting in the city with intentionally engages in fighting. So again, my apologies that the track changes version didn't end up in the packet, but that's, other than that, the remainder of the ordinance is as it was presented previously. So you know that Chief Floyd is here. We're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters.
I think one maybe basic question, and I did some research on this, and it really reaffirms my view that maybe the state legislature has made errors in the disorderly conduct statute with all of this restriction about the 500 feet of a funeral procession. But if we have anyone related to the state legislature on the call here, maybe somebody could highlight that for them. My only remaining question, I guess, relates to provoking assault, because that isn't in the RCW anywhere, as far as I can tell anymore, but it used to be. And I wonder, is that because under disorderly conduct A1, that kind of captures it? Because that creates a risk of assault. It's very similar.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question about why provoking assault was taken out of the RCW section, but if council would like staff to look into that, we can look into that. But you know, you're raising a point that that you know, does the person being guilty of disorderly conduct by using abusive language and creating a risk of assault essentially mean the same thing as provoking assault? And I probably should defer to Chief Floyd on whether that distinction is significant for the police.
Yeah, and in the provoking assault, there's a little more. There's by sign or gesture. But I'd just be interested in your insights on that.
During my time as a commissioned officer, I don't recall the RCW having a provoking assault statute, so that may have been changed.
1975 or something like that.
Yeah, that would have been slightly before I started. However, as you pointed out, they are similar in nature. However, the provoking assault, I think, goes into a fair bit more detail in the behavior and what that encompasses than the state statute. The state statute for disorderly conduct just addresses language, which I do see, albeit not likely, but potential that other actions other than words and language could create that risk.
Okay. Yeah, I think that there is a little bit of a free speech concern on provoking assault, but there are many other jurisdictions that have it, and maybe nobody is using it, and maybe that's why that hasn't, because I did not find any cases on point. So
it's, again, as I mentioned previously, it's not something that we use frequently, but in the rare occasion that it does get used, it is very useful.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Young.
No, I just want to emphasize the importance of having that tool, because again, you know, where we are as a society right now is questionable, you know, in some ways, but you know, sort of sometimes being the intended recipient of abusive, indecent language, there has to be tools that will allow you to also be able to protect me. And, you know, it's not about being a protected class. What it really is about, there's a difference between free speech. You know, I'm an advocate of free speech, and as my deceased mother would tell you, you know, her baby often exercises that. And so, but, you know, there's also an element in our society that crosses the line to use that as intended violence, to intend to inflict emotional trauma, but also to advocate for and to as an actionable item for those that would. And we already know we have that going on in our society right now. And so, you know, my concern is making sure that this tool is used when necessary. I'm sure that it'll be discerned and, you know, just by nature of the force that we have, the wonderful force that we do. But I believe that it has to be a tool, because there are times when being, you know, of chocolate can become a problem for people who want to use that as a weapon in order to harm, hurt someone. And I need those tools to be at your disposal to sort of help this process. You know, this is not willy-nilly thrown about and used and someone says some bad word to you and you just sort of fall apart. I'm not that kind of wilting butterfly by any stretch of the imagination. I thought I might add that. But the point is that it is a tool for policing, that in a society that we govern ourselves by and we set the norms of what we will or will not allow. And we're pushing those boundaries now in many ways. But the good news is that by having the type of force that we have that are willing to sort of step in and mediate this issue, it can save lives in many ways and, you know, and stop something from escalating. So I believe this is a proper tool, but the question still is in, you know, sometimes we have to let the courts decide what's free speech or what's not, and that there's a gray line there. But when you advocate for violence, when you advocate to harm someone, that's no longer free speech, in my opinion. And so, and what I'm advocating for as law enforcement is that you have those tools to be able to protect our public from those that would abuse it. Thank you.
So I summarize that you're good with the language of provoking assault in the ordinance.
Summary, Mayor.
Any other, this actually is open for public comment if any members of the public wish to address the council on this issue.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
Unless there's any other comments, I move that City Council authorize the mayor to sign an amendment to interlocal 24019.
Nope, sorry, we're back up.
Oh,
to
I'm on the
C.
wrong one.
That's okay.
Sorry.
The ordinance.
Excuse me. I recommend that we adopt ordinance 4074. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Fantini and a second by Mr. Young to approve ordinance 4074, Title IX update. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, take the vote, please.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Fantini?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next up is 6D. This is interlocal amendment with Skagit County for Indigent Defense Screening Services. This is a discussion item of possible action, and this will be Ms. Shu.
Mayor, Council, members of the audience. Tonight I am bringing forth an amended interlocal agreement with Skagit County. In 2023, we began utilizing the Skagit County's Office of Assigned Counsel to do the screening for whether a person is indigent or not, and whether they have access to the city's public defender. They began doing the in-custody reviews in 2023, and now we would like to expand that to include all of our reviews to ensure consistency in the process and to ensure that we're following all of the requirements necessary for determining who has access to the public defender. So what you have before you is simply that amendment so that we would begin transitioning to having Skagit County do our out-of-custody reviews as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Shu?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton?
Just one quick question. How many do we do a month, do you think? I guess what I'm getting at, is this going to save us money? Not that that's the big question here, but just curious.
Sure. I did do some analysis. We will be paying $40 per review that's done by the Office of Assigned Counsel. We were paying our outside contractor $400 a month to do it. As I looked back over the last year, it's very consistent that that amount, the $400 a month, was about equivalent to what we would be spending with the Office of Assigned Counsel. So I'm not expecting it to be a large increase. The contractor, the interlocal, does allow for, because it goes for a couple of years, that it does have an increase in future years where that would go up. So
thank you.
I'm afraid to
I think
do
it'll
the
be
math.
cost
Was
neutral.
that 10? That was the question you were looking for?
About an average of about 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
I know it wasn't hard math, but I was wanted to make sure she was answering your question. It's 10. Any other questions for Ms. Shu?
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Young?
In lieu of no other questions unless there are, I move that City Council authorize the mayor to sign an amendment to interlocal number 24-019-MCT-001 with Skagit County for indigent defense screening services.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Young, a second by Mr. McDougall to approve the amendment to the Skagit County interlocal for indigent defense. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Fantini?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay,
you.
on to item 6E. Thank you, Ms. Shu. On to item 6E, ordinance 4073, adoption of updated Washington State building codes. And Mr. Coleman, I think, is going to introduce it. And I know we've seen some version of this before. And this is a discussion item with possible action and open for public comment. Mr. Coleman.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. So tonight, Rob Frisinger, the building official, is again going to be here to answer any questions about this proposed ordinance adopting our the 2021 building codes. We did make substantive changes to the format of this ordinance. It's different. It's just presented in a different way, but Rob will explain any of the changes itself that were made. So if it looks different to you, it is. The long and short of what we're trying to do is adopt the code as presented by Washington State. And this is our opportunity to also make little tweaks to the code in our to make it better for what Anacortes wants. We don't get to make a whole lot of different changes. Like, we can't just say, well, we're not going to adopt these codes. The state allows us to do a little bit of changes, and so that's what we're proposing. And we changed the format to make sure that it is very clear about we're adopting something as written by the state, and then the changes that we present in strike through and underline are the changes in our code. It was just a little confusing. A lot of this is going to be the same as it is in the code today, the same amendments that we've had. It was, so the way we've presented it is, imagine we just got rid of everything that we had in the past in adopted in our code, and this is re-presenting it as we wanted to our amendments to read today. So some of it's going to look exactly the same, and Rob's going to explain some of where the differences were. I think we did that the last time also. So I'll stop talking.
All right.
And let
Sounds
our
good.
building official tell you more.
Mr. Freisinger, welcome again.
Well, he took most of my prepared notes and already said them, so I might repeat a little bit. To give you the really short version, I started out with a 16-page version of this, condensed it to a 10-page version of this, and have now expanded it to an 18-page version. It all says basically the same thing, though. In a nutshell, every 3 years, the state adopts a new building code, and we make some adjustments to it to fit our community. Basically, it's the state level is going to be implemented this March, and this is our chance to make our little changes to it. And so these little changes we're making are, for the most part, the same as the changes we've made every 3-year code cycle, at least back the last 2 prior code cycles. Beyond that, I'm not sure because I wasn't here. Our amendments are mostly housekeeping type things, making sure that the amendments we've previously made are now applied to the correct code section, because sometimes they change where the numbers are, things like that. And I'm just gonna sort of run through the ordinance, and as things pop out to me, I'll mention them. The biggest thing of note is really that the state is adopting the Wildland Urban Interface Code for the first time as a statewide thing. Previously, it's just been cities were allowed to use it, but it wasn't adopted statewide. Now everybody's required to use it. One minor kind of housekeeping change is we used to have a 200...
Excuse me 1 second.
Mr. Young.
Thank you. Would you speak just a little bit closer to the microphone?
Alrighty. That sound better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Throw a little bass in that?
We did.
Okay. We used to have a $200 deposit that we required whenever somebody put in an application for a new home, but we also have a plan review fee, and the deposit was something we'd collect $200 up front. We would then apply it towards the plan review fee. We're proposing to remove that $200 deposit in lieu of just having the plan review fee collected up front. That way, if somebody walks away from a project, we still get paid for doing the review work. And it also simplifies our paperwork. We are proposing adjusting the time frame that permits are valid for. Currently, it's 18 months. We propose changing that to 24 months. That matches other jurisdictions in the area. So we're proposing to extend the time that it's valid by 6 months, but we're going to reduce the renewal time frame on it down from used to be 1.5 years to just a 6-month time frame. So you end up with it basically gives people a little bit longer to get a project going and completed. When folks have to find a contractor, if they get a permit, if they want to get their permit approved before they go to find a contractor, because some contractors don't want to work on something if it's not got a permit ready, then that can stretch out the time beyond the 18 months that was originally given. So that's one proposed change we have. Small, but I think it's meaningful. I know the port has multiple acres of roof to replace next year, and they think it might take more than 18 months. So they didn't ask for that change, but I know they would appreciate it. We have left the plan review fees within this ordinance. Previously we discussed looking at removing them, but in essence, we're sort of running out the clock on when we need to adopt these. And so it would be much more convenient for us if we had a separate action to move the fees from that. So currently they're still in there. One thing, oh, go ahead.
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters.
Yes, I think that would be preferred as part of our project of moving all of our fees to our unified fee schedule. So I appreciate your mentioning that. There's a whole couple of sections about review fees, but then there are a couple of fees sprinkled throughout the other sections. So there will be things to do here. I thought maybe we'd mentioned this last time. There's a violations section, 115.4. I think it's in the IBC. Did we look at integrating that with our Title 20?
Yeah, that was similar to fees. It would be, in essence, the way the building code is currently written with that portion in there. So we're just filling in a blank there. But it would be, in essence, it was more convoluted, removing that and going to our Title 20 section.
I mean, we wrote Title 20 to have more tools in the toolbox than just a civil fine, which is what's listed here. Because I guess we can assess civil fines, but I'm not sure how we can actually end up collecting civil fines. I think there's still some work that we could do there to improve enforceability. What's our deadline for adoption?
The 15th of March.
Okay.
So we're basically currently up against that.
Did you have some more highlights, Rob?
I gotta flip through them here because most of them, once you get through the IBC, all the other codes have pretty much the same changes. It's a bit repetitive, and I kind of enjoy building codes, but it's a stretch here.
Well, I know council when they got the packet, they memorized the code.
There's one change I did want to mention, bring up to you again, was we've got a section in the fire code where the building code just says basically roads need to be per community standards for firefighter access, and we went back to the national level codes and basically inserted the national level language because the state had stripped it out to make it convenient for cities to have what worked for them. The fire chief assured me that what worked for the national level was also going to work for him. We also adjusted an elevator car size by 2 inches to match the state code. We basically were letting that prior amendment sort of dissolve away with the new ones. And that's actually about it for what I got here.
All right. Any additional questions for Mr. Fratzinger?
Mayor Miller.
Mr. Walters and then Ms. Moulton, I think.
I'm sorry, could you cover again what it is that you're proposing as an amendment in the fire code for apparatus access?
That is...
Because in our current code, I don't see that we have amended section 503.1 of the IFC.
Oh, in the state level version, the 503.1 is simply fire access roads per community standards. That one sentence is all the state has. We don't have community standards set out.
I see.
So in essence, that section it's the national level code.
Everything underlined in that section is what we've added to match the national code.
Yes, correct.
Sorry, Ms. Moulton.
Thank you. Thanks for this presentation. I just had a question about the wildland urban interface code, and I see this table of required defensible space. So this will be for new construction?
It's for new construction and any new work done.
Okay, so if I were next to the forest lands and I added a deck, that would be subject to this?
Yes.
And I'm just curious if you know or not, how many homes are within or closer than these? Do you think there are a whole bunch that would not currently fulfill this requirement?
The best way to think about it is you can factor in, or you imagine a fire break, and that's simply a space that won't burn well. And so you can either have a fire break on your property, and if you're backed up against the trees and you've got a 20-foot backyard next to your house and you want to put a deck there and you're up against the forest lands, that's not enough of a fire break. And so then you have to modify your construction methods. If you're on the other side of the street from that person, you now have probably an 80-foot wide fire break between your home and the homes that are against the forest land. So once you get across the street, you're pretty much home free for the most part. But it is the folks that are on the side of the road right up against the woods that would be affected by this.
Okay, I was just curious because I know there have been concerns, especially since the fire at Little Cranberry, and that there are people concerned about their homes being close to forest lands, and it's just sort of a general question, wondering how many of those that there are.
Yeah, I don't specifically have a number on how many homes would be affected by that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Walters?
I understand that one of the reasons we're doing this now and not last year is because of the Wildland Urban Interface Code.
Yes, it was the Wildland Interface Code and the Energy Code, both.
The WUI.
Yes, the WUI,
Yeah.
as in woo-wee, as some say. But yeah, between that and the Energy Code,
So can you summarize the controversy over the Wildland Urban Interface Code and where we came from and where we landed, and has there been any change? I understood that there was some problem with the maps. Does that affect us? Is there anything that we should be aware of here?
Yeah, there's one minor modification that we have. We have an amendment where we specifically mention using table 801 in there. I gotta find where it is. We mentioned table 801 and also using developed right-of-way as counting towards defensible space. Table 801 is it's a section within the code that basically is a little check sheet that allows you to quantify, I guess I'd say fire safe or fire dangerous variables and come up with a number that you can then say, okay, this is high hazard, medium hazard, or lower hazard. And if you use the table, you actually come up with a lower number than if you do a site visit and look at a specific piece of property. So that's one way to get around. That completely ignores the map, or almost completely ignores it. The map has, it's not granular enough data. It shows, where we are right now is within the Wildland Urban Interface because we're within 1.5 miles of trees. Now, we're on an island. There's a mountain in the middle that's covered with trees. The whole thing's within 1.5 miles of the trees, except for a little patch of gray in the map that I call the Safeway parking lot. But it doesn't quite line up, but it's pretty similar. It's like, you look around, there's plenty of pavement. We're not going to have a wildfire that's going to go through Anacortes, downtown area. It's just not going to happen. So using table 801 allows us to, in essence, quantify things on a neighborhood scale, and that gets the requirements for additional building measures or additional fire safe measures reduced considerably. My goal is that we have a sensible rule rather than a unnecessarily restrictive rule. And the WUI came out of, just to give you the little bit of history, as a response to the campfire in California, where basically they had 7 months of no rain. They had water restrictions in the affected city, prohibiting anybody from watering anything because they hadn't had any rain, so they didn't want people to water their lawns and use up their minimal amount of water they had. And so everything was ultra dry. And they had a fire. They only had one access into the community, and that road got caught in the fire. And so there was a considerable loss of life there. So one of the things they look at is how many accesses you have to the neighborhood. So things like 2 roads in, and most of our cities a grid system or a network of streets where you typically, you don't have to go very far before you can make a left or a right. So we have very limited number of neighborhoods that are actually fall under the categories of the limited access type things that they get worried about. Marine Heights was the one that popped out when I was looking at our map as far as only 1 road in, 1 road out, and tucked into the trees.
Okay, I don't know if I heard any specific changes that council wanted to make to this. Did I miss something? Okay. All right, council. I'm looking for some action or some direction to the staff to make some changes to the code.
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton.
I move that we adopt ordinance 4073, the adoption of the updated Washington State Building Codes.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Ms. Moulton and a second by Mr. Young to adopt ordinance 4073. Any additional discussion? Mr. Franciac.
Ms. Moulton.
Yes.
Mr. McDougall.
Yes.
Ms. Hubick.
Yes.
Mr. Fantini.
Yes.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
Mr. Walters.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Next up is item 6F. This is resolution 3151, ratifying the declaration of emergency and bidding waiver for the water treatment plant and generator controls upgrade. It's a discussion item, possible action, and again, you all have received an email from me regarding this subject last week, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Aum to give you any more details that you might want.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I actually have Brian McDaniel here. He's the water system manager. Just going to give you a little more details. I just anecdotally just want to let you know that when I get called early in the morning, he's been up all night, and this is the second night going. That's why I kind of switched from an annoyance to this is become very serious. So that's the emergency declaration. And with that, I will hand it over to Mr. McDaniel to explain what it is that we're replacing.
Thank you, Andy. Brian McDaniel, Water System Manager, Public Works, City of Anacortes. Good evening, Mayor, Council. In front of us this evening, we're asking for the emergency declaration for the replacement of the control system for the emergency generator at the water treatment plant. This control system, it is outdated and is sitting on a platform with Windows XP. So that system is no longer available, and the major issue with this that none of the components are supported, and so when power goes off at the water treatment plant, this system takes over and it tells the generators when to turn on. It also tells the generators when to turn off and switch back to shore power when the power comes back on. We have been in the process of getting this replaced. However, as of late, I call them our little gremlins seem to come in. And when these gremlins come into the system, when the power blinks off, we manually have to turn the generators on. But the system actually gives us trouble of turning it back on to shore power. So it will actually prevent us from going back to regular power. As this has gone on, these symptoms have changed over time, over the last 2 emergencies that we've had. And I informed the Public Works Director, I said, At this point in time, we are having trouble getting these things turned back on. We need to escalate this and get these controls replaced. So that's why we declared the emergency, to give us the tools and resources to be able to get this turned back on should they not come back on for us. So with that, I'll open it up with questions.
Yeah, and what allowed for the, making that emergency declaration last week was to allow for that contractor to have the knowing that they're able to come in and start helping us with the solution immediately. So, anyway, with that, council, questions?
Mayor Miller?
Ms. Moulton and then Mr. Young.
Okay.
Thank you. One of the things we learned at our Public Works Committee meeting tonight is this has been on the capital facilities plan. It was scheduled for 2023, but hadn't happened. So it was going to happen anyway, but the failing nature of these controls means that we're doing it now.
Mr. Young.
Thank you. Ms. Moulton, as always, is so fortuitously intuitive. That was the question I was going to ask, my friend. But in follow-up to that, one of the things that came out in the committee meeting prior to council tonight was the fact that, I was wondering if this would mean a substantial cost, just simply by it being an emergency. And really, the answer to that is no. And part of that is, was sort of baked into where we were going to have to go, and at the end of the day, so there wasn't any substantial cost in it being emergencies. And so, part of what we, at least I as a consumer, when someone says emergency, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we've got astronomical costs coming into play, but in this case, it's not. And so I am very supportive. Thank you.
Mayor Miller?
Mr. Fantini.
I just had a quick question. So it goes down and you have trouble getting it back on. When this replacement is happening, what is kind of the fail-safe during that time?
That is a great question. And so at this point in time, we are going to be able to leverage the tools and resources from the manufacturer to come in and help us get it turned back on. We do have to wait for them to manufacture the parts and components to get them to install those. So we're kind of holding our breath at this point.
Well, then thank you, everyone, for your swift action.
Mr. Walters.
Are there any other computers running 20-year-old versions of Windows at the water treatment plant?
None that we're aware of at this time.
It seems like a red flag.
Yeah. The interesting portion is that this system was installed in 2013, and so at the time, it was the thing to have, but we've outgrown that, and we're learning that through a couple of analysis that 10 years is roughly the life expectancy of these types of components. And so we're looking at those throughout the system as well.
Mr. McDougall.
I guess if no further questions, I move that Resolution 3151 be approved, ratifying declaration of emergency and the waiver of state competitive bidding requirements for the Public Works project titled WTP Generator Control Upgrade pursuant to the RCW 3904-280.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McDougall, a second by Mr. Fantini to approve Resolution 3151. Additional discussion? Mr. Franciac, vote please.
Mr. McDougall?
Yes.
Ms. Hubick?
Yes.
Mr. Fantini?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Yes.
Mr. Walters?
Yes.
Ms. Moulton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Item 7 is 7A. The council is going to move into an executive session for potential litigation per RCW 4230-1101I. Be approximately 20 minutes. The times now is 8:24, and we'll plan to come back to adjourn the meeting at 8:44, or we'll come back to extend the time if that's required.